came seeking shelter, but what they found in the Comanche chief's camp would test their courage, their beliefs, and the very limits of trust. And when an unexpected bond begins to form, everything they thought they knew about fear and about themselves starts to unravel. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the endless prairie, turning the dry grass into waves of gold that shimmered in the scorching heat. It was the summer of 1867, and the frontier was a place where survival meant more than just enduring the elements. It meant navigating a world where two civilizations collided, where trust was scarce, and where desperation could drive people to make choices they never imagined possible. Margaret Sullivan was 53 years old, her face weathered by years of hardship and loss. Her once bright auburn hair had faded to silver, tied back in a severe bun that accentuated the sharp angles of her cheekbones. Despite the toll life had taken on her body, there was still a fierce determination in her pale blue eyes, a refusal to surrender even when everything seemed lost. Beside her sat her daughter, Eleanor, a woman of 40 who had never known the touch of a man, never experienced the joy of her own family. Eleanor's beauty was undeniable, even after 4 decades of life. Her long chestnut hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and her hazel eyes held a mixture of innocence and quiet strength. Her features were delicate yet defined, with high cheekbones and full lips that rarely smiled anymore. She was tall and graceful, her figure still youthful despite her age, but there was a sadness that clung to her like a shadow, the weight of years spent caring for her ailing father and helping her mother survive on their small homestead. Their wagon creaked and groaned as it rolled across the uneven terrain, pulled by 2 exhausted horses that had seen better days. Everything they owned was packed into that wagon, though it amounted to little more than a few pieces of worn clothing, some cooking utensils, and the fading memories of a life that had crumbled around them. Margaret's husband had died 3 months earlier, succumbing to a fever that ravaged his body, despite Eleanor's tireless efforts to nurse him back to health. With him went their last hope of maintaining the farm. Debts piled up like storm clouds, and when the bank came to collect, they took everything except what the 2 women could carry. For weeks, Margaret and Eleanor had traveled from town to town, searching for someone who would take them in, offer them work, or at least show them a shred of human kindness. But in every settlement they entered, doors closed in their faces. The war had ended only 2 years ago, and people were struggling to rebuild their own lives. Nobody had room for 2 more mouths to feed, especially not a middle-aged woman and her unmarried daughter, who brought nothing but their need. "Mama, we should stop soon," Eleanor said softly, her voice hoarse from the dust that constantly filled their throats. "The horses need rest and we need to find water." Margaret nodded, her jaw set in that familiar stubborn line that Eleanor had known all her life. "Just a little farther. I saw smoke on the horizon earlier." "Where there's smoke, there might be people," Eleanor wanted to argue, wanted to point out that people had brought them nothing but rejection and cruelty, but she held her tongue. Her mother had aged 10 years in the past few months, and Eleanor couldn't bear to add to her burdens. Instead, she reached over and squeezed Margaret's weathered hand, offering what comfort she could. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and crimson, they crested a small rise and found themselves looking down into a valley. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Below them, spread across the grassland like something from another world, was a Comanche camp. Dozens of buffalo-hide teepees stood in organized clusters, smoke rising from cooking fires. Horses grazed in a makeshift corral, and people moved about their daily tasks, their bronze skin gleaming in the fading light. Margaret pulled the wagon to a halt, and for a long moment, neither woman spoke. They had heard the stories, of course. Everyone on the frontier knew about the Comanche, the fierce warriors who had resisted the encroachment of white settlers with unmatched ferocity and skill. Tales of raids, of captives, of violence that made strong men tremble in their beds. But they had also heard other stories, whispered in quieter voices, of honor, of a different way of life, of people who lived in harmony with the land in ways white settlers never could. "Mama, we can't," Eleanor whispered, fear creeping into her voice for the first time in weeks. "They'll kill us." Margaret stared down at the camp, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, almost calm. "They might, but everyone else has already left us to die slowly. At least this way, we'll know quickly." She paused, then turned to look at her daughter with eyes that held both love and profound weariness. "Eleanor, we have no food left, no water, no money, no prospects. We've been turned away from every place that calls itself civilized. What do we have to lose?" Eleanor wanted to protest, wanted to suggest they try one more town, one more homestead, but she knew her mother was right. They were dying already, just more slowly than if a Comanche arrow found its mark. At least here there was a chance, however slim, that desperation might meet with something other than closed doors and cold hearts. "Stay close to me," Margaret said, snapping the reins. The wagon lurched forward, beginning its descent into the valley. As they approached the camp, Eleanor noticed that the activity below had stopped. People were turning to watch them, pointing, calling out to one another. Warriors emerged from teepees, some already carrying weapons. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. She could feel dozens of eyes on them, assessing, judging, deciding their fate with every yard they covered. The wagon rolled to a stop about 50 yards from the nearest teepee. Margaret climbed down with as much dignity as she could muster, and Eleanor followed, her legs trembling so badly she nearly fell. They stood together beside their wagon, two white women alone in a Comanche camp, waiting. A group of warriors approached, their faces stern and unreadable. They wore buckskin leggings and shirts decorated with intricate beadwork, their long black hair flowing loose or tied with strips of leather. Each carried weapons, bows and arrows, lances, some with rifles that Eleanor knew had been taken in raids or traded. They formed a semicircle around the two women, speaking among themselves in their own language, words that sounded both musical and sharp. Then the crowd parted, and a man stepped forward who could only be their chief. He was perhaps 35 years old, tall and powerfully built, with broad shoulders and arms that spoke of countless hours of riding and fighting. His face was striking, with strong features, high cheekbones, and eyes as dark as midnight that seemed to see everything. His skin was bronzed by the sun, and his long black hair was adorned with eagle feathers that marked his status. He wore no shirt, and his muscled chest bore scars that told stories of battles survived. Despite the potential danger he represented, Eleanor found herself unable to look away. There was something in his bearing, a natural authority mixed with an unexpected quality she couldn't quite name, something that suggested there was more to this man than the savage the stories described. The chief studied them for a long moment, his expression neutral. When he spoke, his English was accented but clear, each word carefully chosen. "Why do you come here, white women? Do you not know this is Comanche land?" Margaret straightened her shoulders, drawing on reserves of courage Eleanor didn't know she still possessed. "We know, great chief. We know the risk we take by coming here, but we come because we have nowhere else to go." Her voice wavered slightly, but she pressed on. "No one gives us shelter. No one will help us. My husband is dead. We have lost everything. We have been turned away from every town, every homestead. We come to you not as enemies, but as human beings asking for mercy from other human beings." The chief's eyes narrowed slightly, studying Margaret's face as if searching for deception. Then his gaze shifted to Eleanor, and she felt the full weight of his scrutiny. She met his eyes, refusing to look away despite her fear, and something passed between them in that moment, something neither could name, but both felt. "You ask mercy from the Comanche," the chief said slowly, and there was something almost like bitter amusement in his tone. "Your people have shown my people no mercy. They have taken our lands, killed our buffalo, broken every promise they have made. And yet you come here, asking us to be what your own kind would not be for you." "I know," Margaret said, and there were tears in her eyes now. "I know the injustices your people have suffered. I know we have no right to ask anything of you, but we are asking anyway, because we have nothing left but our lives, and those are worth very little now. If you want to kill us, we cannot stop you. But if there is any kindness in your heart, any possibility that you might help us, we are begging you." The chief was silent for a long time, and Eleanor could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. feel the sweat trickling down her back despite the cooling evening air. Around them, the warriors and other tribe members watched and waited, their faces showing varying degrees of curiosity, suspicion, and hostility. Finally, the chief spoke again, this time addressing his people in their own language. A heated discussion broke out, voices rising and falling, gestures sharp and emphatic. Eleanor couldn't understand the words, but she could read the emotions clearly enough. Some wanted them gone, perhaps dead. Others seemed uncertain. A few, mostly women, looked at them with something that might have been sympathy. The chief raised his hand and silence fell immediately. He turned back to Margaret and Eleanor, and when he spoke, his voice was firm but not unkind. "I am Tache, chief of this band. Your people call us savages, but we do not turn away those who come honestly seeking help. You may stay, but you must work. You must earn your place here. You will live according to our ways, follow our rules. If you cause trouble, you will leave. If you try to harm any of my people, you will die. Do you understand?" Margaret nodded, tears now flowing freely down her weathered cheeks. "Yes, great chief. Thank you. Thank you. We will work hard. We will cause no trouble. You have our word." Tache gestured to an older woman standing nearby, a grandmother with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair. "Mahiona will show you where you can make your camp and teach you what you need to know. You will help the women with their work. If you prove trustworthy, you will remain. If not—" He didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. As Mahiona approached and began leading them toward a space at the edge of the camp, Eleanor glanced back at Tache one more time. He was watching her, his dark eyes unreadable but intense. Their gazes locked for just a moment before Eleanor turned away, her heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. She didn't know what the future held in this strange new world they had entered, but for the first time in months there was the smallest flicker of something she had almost forgotten existed: hope. The first rays of dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. As Eleanor emerged from the small teepee that Mahiona had helped them construct the previous evening, the morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of sage and wood smoke. Around her, the Comanche camp was already stirring to life. Women were rekindling fires, children were laughing and chasing each other between the teepees, and warriors were tending to their horses in the corral. It was a scene so different from anything Eleanor had known that she felt as though she had stepped into another world entirely. Margaret was already awake, helping Mahiona prepare the morning meal. The older Comanche woman had shown them remarkable patience the night before, using gestures and simple words to teach them how to properly set up their shelter and where to find water. Now she was demonstrating how to prepare pemmican, a mixture of dried meat, fat, and berries that the Comanche relied upon for sustenance. Margaret watched intently, her weathered hands mimicking Mahiona's movements with careful precision. "Good morning, daughter," Margaret said when she noticed Eleanor approaching. There was something different in her mother's voice this morning, a lightness that Eleanor hadn't heard in months. Despite the uncertainty of their situation, despite being surrounded by people they had been taught to fear, Margaret seemed more at peace than she had since Eleanor's father died. "Good morning, Mama," Eleanor replied, kneeling beside them. "What can I do to help?" Mahiona smiled, the wrinkles around her eyes deepening with warmth. She pointed to a pile of buffalo hide that needed scraping, then pantomimed the action they should perform. Eleanor nodded and moved to begin the work, her hands still soft and unused to such labor. Within minutes, her arms ached, but she didn't stop. She was determined to prove their worth, to show Tache and his people that they deserved the chance they had been given. As the morning progressed, Eleanor became aware of eyes watching her. Some were openly curious, particularly the children who would creep closer to stare at her pale skin and unusual clothing before darting away with nervous giggles. Others were more wary, especially some of the warriors who clearly distrusted the presence of white women in their camp. But the gaze she felt most acutely was Tache's. Several times she glanced up to find him observing her from a distance, his expression thoughtful and unreadable. Each time their eyes met, something passed between them, an electric current that made Eleanor's breath catch and her heart race. Around midday, Tache approached their work area. The women nearby fell silent, showing him the respect due to their chief. He spoke first to Mahiona in their language, his tone questioning, and the older woman responded with what seemed like approval, gesturing toward Eleanor and Margaret. Then Tache turned his attention to Eleanor. "You work hard," he said, his English still careful but confident. "This is good. Many white people think they are above such work, that they are better than us." Eleanor set down the scraping tool and stood, wiping her hands on her worn skirt. Up close, Tache was even more imposing than he had seemed the night before. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his presence commanding without being threatening. The morning sun caught the planes of his face, highlighting the strength of his features and the intelligence in his dark eyes. Eleanor found herself struggling to form words under the intensity of his gaze. "We are grateful for your kindness, Chief Tache," she finally managed to say, her voice steady despite her nervousness. "My mother and I understand that you owe us nothing. We will work as hard as necessary to earn our place here, if you will let us stay." Something shifted in Tache's expression, a softening that was barely perceptible, but that Eleanor caught nonetheless. "You speak with respect. This is also good. But I wonder, Eleanor Sullivan, are you not afraid? You are surrounded by those your people call savages and monsters, yet you do not tremble or weep." Eleanor considered his words carefully before responding. She was aware that Margaret had stopped working and was watching the exchange with barely concealed anxiety, afraid that Eleanor might say something to offend their benefactor. But Eleanor felt an unexpected courage rising within her, a desire to speak the truth rather than hide behind polite lies. "I am afraid," she admitted, meeting his eyes directly, "but not of you or your people. I am afraid of starving. I am afraid of dying alone on the prairie with my mother. I am afraid of a world where people who claim to be civilized turn away 2 women in desperate need, without a second thought." She paused, then added quietly, "Your people may be called savages, Chief Tache, but you have shown us more humanity in one day than we received in months of begging at the doors of white settlements. That tells me that perhaps the true savages are not who we have been taught to fear." A ripple of reaction went through the nearby women who understood enough English to follow the conversation. Tache himself seemed taken aback, his eyebrows rising slightly in surprise. For a long moment, he simply stared at Eleanor, as if trying to decide whether her words were genuine or merely clever manipulation. Then, slowly, his stern features relaxed into something that might have been the beginning of a smile. "You have wisdom, Eleanor Sullivan, and you speak your heart. These are qualities my people value highly." He gestured toward the horses in the corral. "Come, I will show you how we care for our horses. If you are to live among us, you must learn our ways properly." Eleanor glanced at her mother, who nodded encouragingly, despite the worry in her eyes. Eleanor followed Tache across the camp, acutely aware of the looks they were drawing. She could feel the weight of judgment from some, curiosity from others, but she kept her head high and her steps steady. The horse corral held perhaps 40 animals, beautiful creatures with sleek coats and intelligent eyes. Tache walked among them with the ease of someone who had spent his entire life with horses, and they responded to his presence with obvious affection, nuzzling his hands and following him like loyal dogs. He stopped beside a magnificent spotted stallion, running his hand along the animal's neck with genuine tenderness. "This is Nadwa," he said. "It means someone found in our language. I found him as a colt, abandoned and alone. Your people would have left him to die as they left you and your mother. But we saved him, raised him, and now he is one of the finest horses in our herd." He looked at Eleanor meaningfully. "Sometimes those who are found become the most valuable members of the family." Eleanor reached out tentatively to stroke the horse's nose, and Nadwa allowed it, his dark eyes watching her with what seemed like gentle curiosity. "He's beautiful," she said softly. "I can see why you treasure him." "I will teach you to ride as we do," Tache said, and there was something almost warm in his voice now. Not the rigid, uncomfortable way of white people, but freely, as though you and the horse are one spirit. "This is important for survival on the plains. Do you wish to learn?" "Yes," Eleanor answered without hesitation. "I want to learn everything. I want to understand your world, your ways. I don't want to simply survive here, Chief Tache. I want to belong." He studied her face for a long moment, and Eleanor had the distinct impression that he was looking past her words, to the truth beneath them. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he nodded slowly. "Then I will teach you. We will begin tomorrow at sunrise. For now, watch how I work with the horses. Learn by observing." For the next hour, Eleanor watched as Tache moved among the horses, checking their hooves, inspecting their teeth, speaking to them in low, soothing tones in his own language. His movements were graceful and assured, his obvious love for the animals evident in every gesture. Eleanor found herself fascinated not just by what he was teaching her, but by the man himself. He was nothing like the monster the stories had made Comanche warriors out to be. He was intelligent, thoughtful, and possessed a depth of feeling that contradicted everything she had been told about his people. As the afternoon sun began its descent, a young warrior approached, speaking urgently to Tache in their language. The chief's expression darkened, his jaw tightening with tension. He replied sharply, then turned to Eleanor with obvious reluctance. "There is trouble I must attend to. Return to your mother now. Stay close to your teepee tonight and do not wander. Some of my warriors are not pleased with your presence here, and I cannot watch over you every moment." His eyes held genuine concern. "Be careful, Eleanor Sullivan." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine, but she nodded and made her way back across the camp. She found Margaret sitting with Mahiona and several other women, attempting to learn basic words in the Comanche language. Her mother looked exhausted but more content than Eleanor had seen her in months. The women were patient teachers, laughing kindly when Margaret mispronounced words and praising her when she got them right. That evening, as mother and daughter sat together in their teepee eating the food Mahiona had shared with them, Margaret reached over and took Eleanor's hand. "I saw you today with the chief," she said quietly. "He watches you, daughter, and you watch him. Be careful. Our situation here is precarious. We cannot afford complications." Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Mama, I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do," Margaret said, but her voice was gentle rather than reproving. "I've seen how you look at each other. I'm not blind, Eleanor, and I'm not foolish. But you must understand what this could mean. We are white women in a Comanche camp, tolerated but not truly trusted. If you were to pursue anything with their chief—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I'm not pursuing anything," Eleanor protested, though even as she spoke the words, she knew they weren't entirely true. Something was growing between her and Tache, something neither of them had asked for, but that seemed to be developing with a will of its own. "He's teaching me their ways, that's all. He wants me to learn to ride tomorrow." Margaret squeezed her daughter's hand. "Just be careful. And remember, Eleanor, you're 40 years old. I know you've never had the chance to experience love or romance, and I blame myself for that. We kept you home to care for your father and to help with the farm, and now you've missed so many opportunities. If you have feelings for this man, I won't stand in your way. But please think carefully about what such a path might mean for both of us." That night, Eleanor lay awake long after her mother had fallen asleep, staring up at the smoke hole in the center of their teepee, where she could see stars glittering in the darkness above. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, mixing with memories of the day, of Tache's hands gentle on his horse, of the way his eyes had softened when he looked at her, of the strange electricity that seemed to spark between them whenever they were near each other. She had spent 40 years believing that love and partnership were not meant for her, that she would live and die alone, caring for others but never truly cared for herself. Now, in the most unlikely place imaginable, among people she had been taught to fear, she felt something awakening in her heart that she had thought long dead. It terrified her and thrilled her in equal measure, and she had no idea what to do with these feelings that seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the camp settling for the night, the low murmur of voices, the crackling of fires dying down, the occasional whinny of a horse. And somewhere out there, she knew, Tache was also awake, perhaps also thinking about the strange connection that was forming between a Comanche chief and a white woman who had come to his camp with nothing but desperation and hope. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new challenges, and perhaps new understanding. Eleanor closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her dreams, when they finally came, were filled with dark eyes and gentle hands, with horses running free across endless plains, and with the possibility of a life she had never dared to imagine might be hers. The dawn broke cold and clear, with frost glistening on the grass like scattered diamonds. Eleanor had barely slept, her mind too active with anticipation and uncertainty about what the day would bring. She dressed quickly in the buckskin dress that Mahiona had given her the previous evening, replacing the worn cotton garments that marked her as an outsider. The soft leather felt strange against her skin, but also somehow right, as though she were shedding one identity and tentatively trying on another. Margaret was already awake, watching her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. "You look different," she said softly, "almost like you belong here." "I feel different," Eleanor admitted, running her hands down the fringed leather. "Mama, is it wrong that I feel more at home here after just 2 days than I did in our own settlement after 40 years? Margaret considered the question carefully before responding. "Perhaps home isn't about the place or the people who look like us. Perhaps it's about where we're treated with dignity and kindness. If that's here, Eleanor, then there's no shame in acknowledging it." She stood and embraced her daughter tightly. "Now go. The chief is waiting for you, and it's not wise to keep him waiting." Eleanor stepped out into the crisp morning air and found Tache already at the corral, preparing 2 horses. He had chosen Nadua for himself and a smaller, gentle-looking mare with a coat the color of honey for Eleanor. When he saw her approaching in traditional dress, something flickered across his face, an expression of approval mixed with something deeper that made Eleanor's heart skip. "Mahiona gave you proper clothing," he observed, his dark eyes traveling over her in a way that was assessing, but not disrespectful. "This is good. You cannot learn to ride dressed like white women dress, all stiff and restricted. You must be free to move." He led both horses out of the corral, and Eleanor noticed that neither wore a saddle in the traditional sense. Instead, there were simple blankets secured with woven straps, and the bridles were far simpler than what she was accustomed to seeing. Tache saw her looking and smiled slightly, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. "We do not need all the leather and metal your people use," he explained. "A horse is not a slave to be controlled with force. 'Tis a partner to be guided with trust and understanding. Come, I will show you." He moved to the mare's side and demonstrated how to mount, swinging up onto the horse's back with fluid grace that made it look effortless. Then he dismounted and gestured for Eleanor to try. Her first attempt was clumsy, and she nearly lost her balance, but Tache was there immediately, his strong hand steadying her at the waist. The touch sent a jolt through Eleanor that had nothing to do with fear of falling. "Like this," he said, his voice close to her ear. "Use your strength, but also trust the horse to help you. She wants to work with you, not against you." His hands remained on her waist as he guided her through the motion again, and this time Eleanor managed to seat herself properly on the mare's back. "Good," Tache said, and there was warmth in his voice that made Eleanor glow with pride. "Very good. You learn quickly." He mounted Nadua in one smooth motion and brought the stallion alongside Eleanor's mare. "Now, hold the reins loosely, like this. You guide with gentle pressure, not force. The horse can feel everything through the reins, every emotion, every intention. If you are tense, the horse will be tense. If you are calm, the horse will be calm. Breathe, Eleanor. Trust yourself and trust your partner." They started at a walk, circling the camp perimeter. Tache rode beside her, offering corrections and encouragement in equal measure. Eleanor was acutely aware of his presence, of the way he moved with his horse as though they were indeed one spirit, of the power and grace in his every motion. She tried to emulate what she saw, relaxing into the horse's rhythm, feeling the warmth of the animal beneath her and the connection that Tache had spoken of. As they rode, Tache began to speak, his words coming more freely than they had before. "When I was young, my father taught me as I now teach you. He said that everything in life is like riding a horse. You cannot force it to go where you want through violence and dominance. You must build trust, show respect, work together. When white men ride, they fight their horses, always pulling and kicking and demanding. This is why they never truly understand these animals, why they see them only as tools." He glanced at Eleanor, his expression serious. "It is the same with people. Your kind comes to our lands wanting to force us to live as you live, to give up our ways, to become something we are not. But this cannot work. There must be understanding, respect, partnership. Eleanor absorbed his words, recognizing the deeper meaning beneath the lesson on horsemanship. You're right, she said quietly. We've been taught that our way is the only way, that anything different is wrong or savage. But being here, seeing how your people live, how you care for each other and for the land and animals, I'm beginning to understand how blind we've been. They rode in silence for a while, moving out onto the open prairie where the grass stretched endlessly in all directions. The sun had fully risen now, warming the air and burning off the morning frost. Eleanor felt something opening inside her, a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. The wind in her hair, the power of the horse beneath her, the vast open sky above and beside her, this remarkable man who was showing her a world she never knew existed. Why did you really let us stay? Eleanor asked suddenly, the question that had been haunting her since that first night. You could have sent us away, or killed us, as you said. Why take the risk of harboring 2 white women? Tache was quiet for so long that Eleanor thought he might not answer. Then he pulled Nadwa to a stop, and Eleanor did the same with her mare. They sat on their horses, facing each other, with nothing but the prairie wind and the distant cry of a hawk between them. I lost my wife 3 years ago, Tache said, and there was old pain in his voice, carefully controlled but still present. She died bringing our child into the world, and the child died with her. For a long time after, I felt nothing but anger and hatred. I blamed the white men for everything, for pushing us from our lands, for bringing diseases that killed our people, for destroying the buffalo herds we depend upon. I wanted revenge, wanted to strike back at everyone who looked like those who had caused us so much suffering. He paused, his jaw working as though the words were difficult to speak. But my father, who was chief before me, told me something before he died. He said that hatred is like drinking poison and expecting your enemy to die. It destroys you from within, while accomplishing nothing. He said that if I wanted to truly honor my wife and child, I should find a way to create life instead of taking it, to build bridges instead of burning them. Eleanor felt tears pricking her eyes as she listened, understanding for the first time the depth of loss this man had endured. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I cannot imagine such pain. When you and your mother came to our camp, Tache continued, I saw an opportunity. I saw 2 people who had been abandoned by their own kind, who came to us with nothing but honest need. I thought, if I turn them away, I am no better than those I despise. If I help them, perhaps I honor my father's wisdom and my wife's memory. Perhaps I prove that we are not the savages they claim we are. He met Eleanor's eyes, and in his gaze she saw vulnerability mixed with strength. But I did not expect to find that one of them would touch something in my heart I thought had died with my wife. I did not expect you, Eleanor Sullivan. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and possibility. Eleanor's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She wanted to reach out to him to close the distance between them, but fear and uncertainty held her back. Tache, Chief Tache! The shout came from back toward the camp, urgent and alarmed. They both turned to see a young warrior riding hard toward them, his face tight with concern. He spoke rapidly in Comanche when he reached them, gesturing back toward the camp, and Eleanor watched as Tache's expression darkened with anger and worry. What is it? Eleanor asked, fear creeping into her voice. What's wrong? Trouble, Tache said grimly. Some of my warriors have taken your mother. They say she was trying to steal food, that she cannot be trusted. They want to vote on whether you both should be forced to leave or punished. He kicked Nadwa into a gallop, racing back toward camp, and Eleanor urged her mare to follow, terror flooding through her veins. They arrived to find a crowd gathered in the center of the camp. Margaret was on her knees, held by 2 warriors, her face pale with fear. Mahiona was arguing loudly with several men, gesturing emphatically, but they were shouting her down. Eleanor leaped from her horse before it had fully stopped, nearly falling in her haste, and ran to her mother's side. Mama, what happened? Are you hurt? Eleanor, I'm sorry, I didn't mean— Margaret's voice was choked with tears. I was just trying to help prepare food, and I took some dried meat from a storage area, but I didn't know I wasn't supposed to go there. I didn't understand. One of the warriors, a man named Comanche, who Eleanor recognized as one of those who had been most hostile to their presence, spoke in heavily accented English. She steals from us. We show kindness, give shelter, and she repays by stealing. This is the way of white people, always taking what is not theirs. She didn't steal, Eleanor protested, her voice rising with desperation. She didn't understand. We've only been here 2 days. We don't know all your customs yet. Please, this is a misunderstanding. Enough! Tache's voice cut through the chaos like a blade, commanding instant silence. He strode into the center of the circle, his presence radiating authority. He spoke first in Comanche, his words sharp and forceful, and Eleanor watched as some of the warriors' expressions shifted from anger to uncertainty. Then he switched to English, clearly wanting both Eleanor and Margaret to understand. Eleanor Sullivan speaks truth. These women are still learning our ways. Mahayona confirms that the storage area was not marked as forbidden, that it was an honest mistake born of ignorance, not malice. We will not punish people for not knowing what they have not been taught. He fixed Comanche with a hard stare. You speak of white people always taking, but what are you doing now? You take a frightened woman who meant no harm and try to make her into an enemy to justify your own prejudice. Who is the thief here? Who steals peace and understanding from our camp? Comanche's face flushed with anger, but he didn't back down. You defend them because the daughter has caught your eye, Tache. Everyone sees how you look at her, how you spend time alone with her. You dishonor the memory of your wife for a white woman. Perhaps it is you who has been poisoned by their presence. A collective gasp went through the crowd at this open challenge to their chief. Tache's expression turned to stone, his eyes blazing with fury. For a moment Eleanor thought he might strike Comanche, but instead he drew himself up to his full height and spoke with cold precision. You dare question my honor? You dare speak of my wife, whom you know I loved more than life itself? His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried to every person present. Yes, I have spent time with Eleanor Sullivan. I have taught her our ways, as my father taught me to share knowledge rather than hoard it. I have treated her with respect, as I would treat any person who comes to us honestly and works hard to earn their place. If you see something shameful in this, the shame is in your eyes, not in my actions. He turned slowly, addressing the entire gathering. But since Comanche has chosen to make this a public matter, I will speak publicly. Yes, I find Eleanor Sullivan worthy of respect and admiration. She is strong, brave, and willing to learn. She does not judge us by the color of our skin or the stories she has been told, but by what she sees with her own eyes. She treats us as human beings, with dignity and kindness. His gaze found Eleanor in the crowd, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer but no less powerful. And yes, I feel something for her that I did not expect to feel again. Something that makes me remember that I am not just a chief or a warrior, but also a man with a heart that can still feel joy. The camp was absolutely silent. Eleanor could barely breathe, her entire world narrowing to Tache's face, to the truth she saw there, to the public declaration he had just made that changed everything between them. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she made no move to wipe them away. Tache turned back to Comanche. If you challenge my leadership, if you believe I am unfit to be chief because I choose hope over hatred, then speak now and we will settle this according to our traditions. But know that if you make that challenge, you challenge not just me but the path my father set us on, the path of survival through adaptation and wisdom, rather than destruction through endless war. Comanche stood frozen, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Around him, other warriors were shifting uncomfortably, and several were shaking their heads. Finally, an older warrior stepped forward, one of the respected elders of the tribe. Tache speaks with wisdom, the elder said, his voice carrying the weight of years and experience. Comanche, your anger comes from pain, from losses we have all suffered. But Tache is right. If we become what we hate, if we show the same cruelty and closed-mindedness that has been shown to us, then we have already lost everything that makes us who we are. The white woman made a mistake, nothing more. Let it be forgiven and let us return to peace." One by one, the other warriors nodded their agreement. Comanche stood alone, his face still dark with resentment, but he finally bowed his head in submission. "I accept the wisdom of the elders," he said stiffly. Then he turned and walked away, several of his supporters following. Tache gestured for the warriors holding Margaret to release her, and Eleanor immediately rushed to help her mother to her feet. Margaret was trembling, tears of relief streaming down her face. Mahiona appeared at their side, putting a supportive arm around Margaret's shoulders and speaking soothing words. "Take your mother to rest," Tache said to Eleanor, his voice now gentle. "We will speak later, you and I. There is much we need to say to each other." The afternoon sun hung low in the western sky, casting long shadows across the Comanche camp as Eleanor sat with her mother in their tipi. Margaret had finally stopped trembling, though her face remained pale and drawn. Mahiona had brought them hot tea made from herbs that she promised would calm the nerves, and the older woman sat with them now, her presence a comfort in the aftermath of the morning's turmoil. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor," Margaret whispered for perhaps the 20th time. "I've put us both in danger with my foolishness. If Chief Tache hadn't defended us, if he hadn't spoken so strongly—" She broke off, looking at her daughter with new understanding. "He loves you. I saw it in his eyes when he spoke. That man loves you." Eleanor felt her cheeks flush hot, but she didn't deny it. "I think perhaps he does. And Mama, I think I love him too, though I hardly know how it's possible after such a short time. It feels like madness, like something that cannot be real." Mahiona, who understood more English than she usually let on, reached over and patted Eleanor's hand. "Heart knows," she said in her halting English. "Time not matter. Heart knows truth." She smiled warmly, her weathered face crinkling with genuine affection. "Tache good man, strong, kind, sad too long. You bring light back to his eyes. This good thing." Before Eleanor could respond, a young girl appeared at the entrance to their teepee, speaking shyly in Comanche. Mahiona listened, then turned to Eleanor with a knowing smile. "Chief wants to speak with you. By the river. Go now." Eleanor's heart began to race. She looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly despite the worry still visible in her eyes. "Go, daughter. Hear what he has to say. And Eleanor, whatever you decide, whatever path you choose, know that I support you. You've given up so much of your life for your father and me. It's time you lived for yourself." Eleanor embraced her mother tightly, then stood and smoothed down her buckskin dress. She followed the young girl through the camp, acutely aware of the eyes that followed her progress. Some looks were curious, others disapproving, but several of the women smiled at her with what appeared to be encouragement. Word of Tache's public declaration had spread throughout the camp, and everyone now knew that something significant was developing between their chief and the white woman who had arrived at their camp just 3 days ago with nothing but desperation and hope. The river ran along the eastern edge of the camp, its waters clear and cold, fed by mountain springs far to the north. Cottonwood trees lined its banks, their leaves rustling in the gentle evening breeze. Tache stood at the water's edge, his back to her, his powerful frame silhouetted against the golden light. He had changed from his earlier clothing and now wore ceremonial dress, a beautifully crafted buckskin shirt decorated with intricate beadwork and quillwork, his long black hair adorned with eagle feathers. He looked every inch the noble chief, but Eleanor had come to know that beneath the mantle of leadership was a man who had known great sorrow and was now, cautiously, allowing himself to hope again. "Eleanor," he said, turning as he heard her approach. His dark eyes met hers, and in them she saw vulnerability mixed with determination. "Thank you for coming. I was not sure you would after everything that happened today." "Of course I came," Eleanor replied, moving to stand beside him at the river's edge. "How could I not after what you said, after how you defended my mother and me?" Tache was quiet for a moment, watching the water flow past. When he spoke, his words came slowly as though he were choosing each one with great care. "I spoke truth today, Eleanor. Truth that I had been holding inside, afraid to acknowledge even to myself. But Comanche's challenge forced me to be honest. to face what I have been feeling since the moment you arrived at our camp." He turned to face her fully, and Eleanor found herself holding her breath, waiting. "In my culture," Tache continued, "when a man wishes to court a woman, to make his intentions known, there are traditions, ceremonies, ways of doing things that have been followed for generations. I have already broken many of those traditions simply by allowing myself to feel these things for you. You are not Comanche. You are white, from the people who have caused my people so much pain and loss. By all logic, by all reason, I should not want you. I should not be standing here telling you that you have awakened something in my heart that I believed was dead and buried with my wife." Eleanor felt tears beginning to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back, wanting to hear every word, to understand everything he was trying to tell her. Tache reached out and gently took her hand, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "But the heart does not follow logic or reason," he said, his voice dropping to barely more than a whisper. "The heart feels what it feels, and mine feels drawn to you in ways I cannot fully explain. You are strong, Eleanor. You are brave and honest and kind. You look at me and see not a savage or a monster, but a man. You look at my people and see not enemies, but human beings worthy of respect and understanding. In 3 days, you have shown more wisdom and compassion than many people show in a lifetime." "Tache," Eleanor breathed, her voice shaking with emotion. "I feel the same. I know it seems impossible, that it happened too quickly, that there are 1,000 reasons why it shouldn't be. But I cannot deny what I feel when I'm near you, when I look into your eyes. For 40 years I believed I would never know love, never have someone look at me the way you do, as though I matter, as though I'm precious. You've given me hope, not just for survival, but for something more, something I didn't even know I could want." Tache raised his other hand and cupped her cheek, his touch infinitely gentle. "Then hear me now, Eleanor Sullivan. I want you to stay, not as a guest or a worker, but as my woman, my partner, my wife, if you will accept me. I know this will not be easy. There will be those among my people who will never fully accept you, just as there will be those among your people who would condemn you for choosing to be with me. But I believe we can build something strong together, something that honors both where you came from and where you are now." Eleanor's tears were flowing freely now, tears of joy and relief and overwhelming emotion. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, Tache, I will stay. I will be your wife. I will learn your ways and become part of your people, if they will have me. Because in 3 days I have found more of a home here than I ever had in 40 years of living among my own kind." Tache pulled her close, wrapping his strong arms around her, and Eleanor melted into his embrace, feeling safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced before. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other beside the flowing river as the sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red and gold. When they finally pulled apart, Tache kept her hands in his. "There will be a ceremony," he said, and there was happiness in his voice, a lightness she hadn't heard before. "We will be married according to our traditions. Mahiona will help you prepare, teach you what you need to know, and your mother will be honored as family, welcomed fully into the tribe. She will never again have to fear being turned away or left to suffer alone." "Thank you," Eleanor whispered. "Thank you for seeing us, for giving us a chance when no one else would. Thank you for opening your heart, when it would have been so much easier to keep it closed." They walked back to the camp together, hand in hand, and as they entered the circle of teepees, Tache called out in Comanche, his voice ringing with authority and joy. People emerged from their homes, gathering around to hear what their chief had to say. Mahiona appeared with Margaret, both women's faces alight with anticipation. Tache spoke first in his own language, his words flowing with passion and conviction, and Eleanor watched as the reactions rippled through the crowd. Some faces showed surprise, others approval, and yes, a few still showed resistance, but the majority seemed pleased. And when Tache finished speaking, several people began to ululate, a high-pitched cry of celebration that Eleanor had heard before but never directed at her. Then Tache switched to English, clearly wanting both Eleanor and Margaret to understand. I have announced that Eleanor Sullivan will become my wife, that she and her mother will be fully adopted into our tribe, and that in 3 days' time, we will hold the marriage ceremony. I have also made it clear that anyone who cannot accept this, anyone who cannot treat them with the respect due to family, is free to leave and join another band. We will not force unity, but neither will we tolerate hatred or cruelty toward those who have done nothing to deserve it. Margaret rushed forward, embracing Eleanor tightly, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Oh, my darling girl," she sobbed. "You've found love. You've found a home after everything we've lost, everything we've endured. You've found something beautiful and precious. I'm so happy for you." Mahiona approached with several other women, all smiling warmly, and they began speaking to Eleanor in a mixture of Comanche and broken English, clearly excited to begin preparing for the ceremony. They pulled her away from Tache, laughing at his mock protests, and led her toward a larger teepee where Eleanor could see beautiful garments and decorations being brought out. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of activity and learning. Mahiona and the other women taught Eleanor the significance of the marriage ceremony, the meanings behind each ritual and symbol. They crafted for her a stunning wedding dress of white buckskin, decorated with thousands of tiny beads and patterns that told stories of love and unity and new beginnings. They taught her words in Comanche that she would need to speak during the ceremony, patient with her pronunciation and encouraging with her progress. Margaret, too, was embraced by the women of the tribe. They showed her how to properly prepare foods, how to tan hides, how to create the beautiful quill work and beadwork that decorated their clothing and possessions. Eleanor watched her mother transform before her eyes, the years of worry and grief falling away, as she found purpose and community among these women who had once been strangers and supposed enemies. Tache spent his days preparing as well, though Eleanor saw him only briefly. It was tradition, Mahiona explained, for the couple to spend time apart before the wedding, reflecting on the commitment they were about to make and preparing their hearts and minds for the joining of their lives. But each evening, just before sunset, Tache would appear at the entrance to Eleanor's teepee, and they would walk together by the river, talking about their hopes and dreams, their fears and uncertainties, building the foundation of understanding and trust that would support their marriage. On one of these walks, Eleanor asked him about Comanche and the others who had opposed her presence. "Have they caused more trouble? Are they still angry?" Tache shook his head. "Comanche has chosen to leave and join his cousin's band to the north. A few others went with him, but not as many as I feared. Most have decided to stay, to give this new path a chance. Change is always difficult, Eleanor, especially for those who have suffered greatly and find it hard to trust. But I believe that with time, with patience, those who remain will come to see what I see in you, will come to accept you not as an outsider, but as one of us. And if they don't?" Eleanor asked quietly, "What if I can never truly belong here, no matter how hard I try?" Tache stopped walking and turned to face her, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite tenderness. "Then we will build our own belonging, you and I together. We will create a space where love matters more than the color of skin, where understanding matters more than tradition for tradition's sake, where two people from different worlds can come together and make something new and beautiful." He kissed her forehead gently. "You already belong, Eleanor. You belong with me and I with you. Everything else will follow in time." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the sky a brilliant blue unmarred by clouds. Eleanor woke before sunrise, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The women came for her early, helping her bathe in the river, washing her long chestnut hair with sweet-smelling herbs, combing it until it shone like silk in the morning light. They dressed her in the white buckskin dress, adjusting every fold and fringe until it was perfect, and adorned her hair with wildflowers that had been gathered from the prairie. When Eleanor finally saw her reflection in a polished piece of metal that served as a mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked beautiful, yes, but more than that, she looked transformed. The woman staring back at her was not the desperate, defeated person who had arrived at this camp just days ago. This woman was radiant with hope and joy, her eyes bright with anticipation, her face glowing with the knowledge that she was loved and wanted and valued. Margaret came to her just before the ceremony was to begin, taking both of Eleanor's hands in hers. "Your father would have been so proud," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not because you're marrying a chief, not because you found security, but because you found true love, genuine partnership, a man who sees your worth and cherishes it. That's all we ever wanted for you, Eleanor. That's all any parent wants for their child." "Thank you, Mama," Eleanor whispered. "Thank you for supporting me in this, for not letting your fears or prejudices stop you from seeing what Tache and his people truly are. Thank you for being brave enough to come here with me, to take this chance." "You gave me courage," Margaret replied. "You showed me that it's never too late to start over, to find a new path, to become part of something larger than ourselves. I've found a home here too, Eleanor. These women, they've become like sisters to me. Mahayona has offered to formally adopt me into her family line. I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm living." The ceremony took place in the center of the camp, with the entire tribe gathered in a large circle. Tache stood at one end, dressed in his finest ceremonial clothing, his face solemn but his eyes burning with love and anticipation. Eleanor walked toward him slowly, accompanied by Mahayona on one side and her mother on the other, the women of the tribe singing a traditional wedding song that spoke of two souls becoming one, of separate paths joining into a single road. When Eleanor reached Tache, he took her hands in his, and they stood facing each other while the tribal elder who had spoken in Eleanor's defense days before began the ceremony. He spoke in Comanche, his words rhythmic and powerful, calling upon the spirits of earth and sky, of ancestors and future generations, to witness and bless this union. Then he switched to English, honoring Eleanor's heritage even as she joined a new one. "Marriage is not the joining of two individuals," the elder said, his voice carrying to every person gathered. "It is the joining of two families, two histories, two ways of seeing the world. Today we witness something rare and precious. We witness the building of a bridge between peoples who have been enemies, the choosing of love over hatred, of hope over despair. Tache and Eleanor, you stand here not just as man and woman, but as symbols of what is possible when we open our hearts to understanding and compassion." The elder continued with the traditional vows, and Eleanor repeated the Comanche words she had practiced, her pronunciation careful and clear. Tache spoke his own vows, in both languages, promising to honor her, protect her, walk beside her through all the joys and sorrows life would bring. Then, according to tradition, they each took a drink from a shared cup of water, symbolizing that their lives were now intertwined, that what sustained one would sustain both. Finally, the elder wrapped a beautifully woven blanket around both their shoulders, binding them together. "You are now husband and wife, partners in all things, united before the tribe and the spirits. May your love be as enduring as the prairie, as strong as the mountains, as constant as the stars. May you build a life together that honors both where you came from and where you are going." The tribe erupted in celebration, the ululating cries of the women mixing with the drums that suddenly began to beat out a joyous rhythm. Tache pulled Eleanor close and kissed her, their first kiss, and Eleanor felt as though her heart might burst with the intensity of her happiness. This was real. This was happening. She was married to this incredible man. She had a home. She had a family. She had a future filled with love and possibility. The celebration continued throughout the day.